I turned to place the breakfast plates on the table when I noticed a sudden shadow behind me. Before my response, the world erupted and I fell to the ground as Matthew struck a wooden rolling pin into my head. There was a wrath on his face that I had never seen before. My head burst in searing pain. "Hello, everyone? My name is Caroline. When I reflect on my life, I realize that I have spent a lot of time at home. I am aware that it consists of a variety of commitments, requests, and unsaid sacrifices from people we love. My story isn't just about me. It also affects my father, a good-hearted and giving man who unintentionally became entangled in the strain of my marriage. 6 years ago, I thought I had everything I could ever want. On the outskirts of Seattle, my husband Matthew, his mother, and I lived in a modest but cozy house. Claire. There was a hidden cost to my place in that household, despite the fact that it would appear to be a loving, caring one. My father was expected to cover all expenses each month. He paid the bills quietly and without protest, but I knew the toll it was taking on him. Despite his best attempts to hide it from me, I could feel the pressure mounting each month, as living with Matthew and Clara felt like walking a tightrope. Claire's dominating manner and incisive language made it obvious what she wanted from me. "It's better this way. It keeps everyone comfortable," Caroline would say, "and your father can afford it." Her tone always made it clear that this was not a suggestion. It was a directive. Matthew never questioned his mother's requests, acting as though he wholeheartedly concurred with them. I loved Matthew, so even though things were difficult in that house, I kept hoping for a change every day. I'm looking for a sign that things could be different and that our family would be united by love rather than my father's financial assistance. But deep down, I knew that I was clinging to a fantasy that was slowly being shattered by unspoken rules and phony smiles. Then one day, everything changed with a tragic phone call. The day my father passed away, my entire world began to collapse. I remember racing to the hospital, walking through cold, empty corridors that seemed to mirror my grief. My father had died of an unexpected heart attack despite the doctor's best attempts, before I could bid them farewell. Not only did I lose my dad, but I also lost the safety he had quietly provided. The cornerstone of my existence seemed to have vanished. A few days after his passing, I was called into his lawyer's office. Even though it seemed strange to think about a will while I was still in mourning, I plucked up the fortitude to go. Sitting in that cold, formal office, the lawyer informed me that my father had given me $100 million and a beautiful house in one of Seattle's most desirable neighborhoods. The number was amazing, and for a moment it seemed unbelievable. I even hoped it was all a coincidence. I noticed a strange shift in Claire's disposition when I got home. Her normally calculating expression had a clear glimmer of avarice. Her tone shifted from one of feigning sympathy to one of firmness and demand when she approached me in the living room. "Caroline." As she spoke, her voice became high-pitched. "You have to transfer the $100 million into my account and give Matthew the house. The best interests of the family are served." Her audacity astounded me. My father's generosity had been taken for granted rather than offering comfort during my grief process. Claire had the opportunity to reclaim what wasn't truly hers because of this. "That is something I can do." "Claire," I replied. My father gave me the house and the money as his final presents, and I talked louder than I felt. "I can't have that taken away from me." Claire approached, her face twisted in anger, her voice now a menacing whisper. "You will regret your decision." "Caroline." I promise you that I stayed firm even though I knew there would be consequences. The tension in the house became unbearable, and it was clear that a storm was building. In the days that followed, the house grew colder. Every area of the house seemed to be filled with hostility and accusations. Matthew, the man I thought I knew, became someone I didn't know at all. Without hesitation, he adopted his mother's side, his face hardened and his words tainted with contempt. Our formerly intense love seemed to wane as a result of Matthew's betrayal and Clara's selfishness. One cold morning, everything came to a head. I had just finished making breakfast. Matthew entered the kitchen, his face tensed with anger. Claire watched from the doorway, her expression grim and expectant. Abruptly, as Matthew raised a wooden rolling pin that I used daily to make bread, he struck me in the head. The world spun as pain exploded through my skull as I fell to the ground. My vision got fuzzy, making it difficult for me to comprehend the betrayal. When I recovered awareness, violence and darkness crept in, and I passed out. I lay on the cold tile floor, the searing throbbing in my head a harsh reminder of what had just happened. I could hear the faint sound of Claire's disdainful voice as she muttered something under her breath. But Matthew was nowhere to be seen. I gently stood up, using a trembling palm to feel the sensitive, swollen spot on my head. I realized that I needed to get out of this house. I picked up my phone and dialed my best friend, a neighbor named Rachel. She picked me up on the first ring and told me to pack a bag since she was en route to me. In just a few minutes, Rachel arrived, helped me grab a few items, and urged me to go. I left the house that had been my home without looking back, knowing that I was leaving behind not just a poisoned atmosphere, but also the people who had cheated on me in the most heinous way possible. At the home of Rachel, I allowed myself to unwind and recuperate. The injury's psychological effects were far worse than its physical ones. I battled every day with melancholy, bitterness, and the inability to believe my own husband could treat me that way. When I was healing, I was determined to control both my life and my father's legacy. What was rightfully mine, I refused to let them have. With Rachel's assistance, I sought legal advice from a lawyer in order to protect the estate my father had given me. During the tense legal proceedings that accompanied the divorce process, Clara and Matthew made an effort to contest my inheritance by alleging that I owed them money. However, I refused to back down with the help of my lawyer and several family friends who knew Clara was dishonest and could attest to the truth. During one hearing, Matthew lost control due to his frustration. In a frenzy, he yelled that they had tolerated me only because of my father's financial support. His tirade aided me by exposing their schemes and enhancing my reputation in the eyes of the court. Finally, I was granted full control of my father's property, and Matthew received a harsh court reprimand that ensured he and Clara could no longer interfere in my affairs. The divorce was formalized for the first time in years. My shoulders were becoming lighter. With the issues settled, I moved into the beautiful home my father had left me. The house was large, with large windows that allowed in lots of natural light. I was reminded of what I had lost by the overwhelming quiet as I moved through each empty room. As the days passed, though, instead of seeing the house as a symbol of my pain, I began to see it as an opportunity for a fresh start. Inspired by his recollections, I thought of my father's kindness, his affection for the community, and his wish to help others. I decided to transform the house into a sanctuary for the elderly, a place where people without family or housing might find companionship, support, and comfort. It seems to be the best way to honor his legacy. With a new feeling of purpose, I got to work transforming the house into a cozy retreat. I contacted care providers and neighborhood associations to let them know that I was setting up a residence for elderly people in need of housing. Every detail was worked on to make the house warm, inviting, and lively, even though it took time. I wanted every individual to feel like a part of the family, from comfortable quarters to welcoming social spaces. The remodeling was nearly complete. I began going to see potential residents, many of whom had fascinating stories to share and were seeking companionship as they grew older. The first resident of our community was Mrs. Teresa Lewis, a vibrant 85-year-old who loved gardening and had a keen sense of humor. She became the focal point of our small family right away, bringing the others together for morning walks in the garden and evening tea to share memories from her background. Her laughter turned the house from a structure into a home. One by one, residents started to occupy the rooms, and before long, my house was a thriving community. We frequently celebrated birthdays, had movie evenings, and had storytelling sessions when everyone shared life memories. The mansion began to radiate warmth and joy, a far cry from the daily silence that had once characterized its corridors. It made me feel stronger and more fulfilled to see the joy our home offered to others who had been alone. Then one afternoon, I got a surprise visitor. It was Daniel, a childhood acquaintance I hadn't seen in a while. Seeing him at my door brought back many joyful memories of our time together as children. He had come to help after hearing about the sanctuary I'd created. For hours, we reminisced about the past and laughed over long-forgotten memories. Daniel's visits soon became normal, and he wasn't just there to catch up. He truly cared about the work I was doing, so he spent time with the seniors, heard about their experiences, and participated in our activities. The residents adored him, and his presence made me and everyone else in the house happy. After everything I had gone through, Daniel's warmth and generosity were like a salve to my wounded heart. We became closer each week, and his visits were a highlight of my days. He understood the pain I had gone through and the journey I had taken to rebuild my life, and his unflinching support was a reminder of the wonderful life still had to offer. One evening, as the sun was gradually lowering, we were strolling in the garden. Daniel averted his gaze from me. It had been years since I'd seen the warmth in his eyes. "Caroline." With a quiet but assured voice, he said, "I'm glad to see you here, building this haven and making so many people happy. It's inspiring, and I've realized that I want to help you in every way throughout this journey. Do you want me to come with you? Do you intend to marry me?" His comments left me stunned, considering all I had been through. I never thought I would ever experience love and happiness again, but he reminded me that they may flourish even after the darkest moments of life. With tears in my eyes and a hopeful heart. "Yes," I said. Our little yet significant wedding was held in the gardens of the sanctuary. The residents, who had become like family, joined us, and their joy and laughter filled the air. The garden's vivid blossoms and gentle lighting made them the perfect setting. Everyone in the room, not just Daniel and me, was genuinely pleased as we exchanged vows. This union was more than a two-person affair. It was proof of new beginnings, perseverance, and the power of community. Before I met Daniel, I had never experienced fullness. To run the sanctuary and ensure that each resident felt loved and cared for, we all collaborated. Daniel's generosity and continuous support created a house that was not only aesthetically stunning, but also warm and kind. The joy and love we experienced with everyone was now reflected in every part of the house that had previously stood for loss. The residents flourished in this environment. Mrs. Teresa, our enthusiastic gardener, was still in charge of daily operations. As she brought everyone together for gardening classes and shared her lifelong learning, her excitement was contagious. As more residents discovered solace in one another, the sanctuary became more than just a place to dwell. As time passed, it became a family and a place where individuals belonged. Both Daniel and I wanted to expand the sanctuary. We built more spaces for the needy so that everyone who visited us felt the same warmth and camaraderie. Because of my father's generosity and the residents' perseverance, we worked hard to achieve this goal. Looking back, I could just about make out who it was. After being broken and duped, I was searching for a feeling of community. The sanctuary had given me an assignment, and Daniel was with me. Peace and satisfaction came to me. It didn't seem possible to me. The house, which had once echoed with emptiness, was now filled with laughter, love, and the stories our tenants had told one another. Together, Daniel and I created a life together that honored my father while still fulfilling our individual objectives. As the seasons shifted, my heart welcomed the beauty of each new day spent helping others. I had found my place in the world where compassion and camaraderie could heal even the deepest wounds. I was sure that Daniel, the sanctuary, and the memories of my father's generosity were where I was supposed to be. I was ready to embrace whatever was ahead, full of gratitude and hope for the innumerable opportunities that lay ahead, since life had given me another chance. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to click the subscribe button for more captivating stories. Share your thoughts in a comment,